everyone, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Muriel, and in this video I will be doing a review of Peter Watt's Blindsight, an ideas-driven science fiction novel I read last month. First published in 2006, Blindsight is a first contact story heavily focused thematically on consciousness, empathy, or rather the lack thereof, and their evolutionary merits, or rather demerits. I guess I had mildly elevated, but also managed expectations going into Blindsight as a primarily ideas or concepts-driven SFF reader, and this is the worst thing I have read this year. So far, given the year isn't quite over yet, though hopefully I won't read anything worse than Blindsight, because bloody hell. So, as you may have guessed, this is, yes, going to be a Rant review. You'll love to see it, admit it. And I will accordingly make full usage of snark mode, because salt and sarcastic humor always help in these situations, am I right? Additionally, and as tends to be the case with my Rant reviews, expect plot spoilers, specifically in the world-building and theming sections. Okay, you all ready? Snark mode activate in 1, 2, 3, go. Blindsight is set in a purportedly post-scarcity future. Our main character is named Siri, and is a teenage edgelord who read some Nietzsche and Dawkins and thinks that makes him extra deep and short. Oh wait, no, sorry, my bad. He's actually an adult dude who has ASPD? Maybe? I don't fucking know. Because of a therapeutic hemispherectomy he underwent as a child. That's not what hemispherectomies actually do to people, but in any case, this unusual cognitive profile makes him specially qualified to translate science done by human AI hybrids, or something, for normier humans, shall we say. So a glorified data analyst, don't at me. But then one day, ba-bam! Lights show up in the sky all over the world. Bring in the aliens, let's go. And our main bruv Siri gets recruited by big government, along with a couple of other non-normie humans, and a resuscitated prehistoric vampire, who will captain a lot of them to go off into space. Whee! Because a big dumb object thought to be the source of the visiting alien lights, or cameras, or have you, has been identified bobbing about in the solar system. Our crew thus needs to establish, audience say it with me, first contact, fuck yeah! With what turns out to be a rather weird and creepy, yes, alien entity, which might be super intelligent, without being conscious. What? Blindsight is written in first person and centers on the exclusive point of view of its male protagonist, Siri, which, given his character, didn't exactly help the book's case for me. Its narrative structure isn't particularly straightforward. You eventually come to understand that what you are reading is Siri's recorded testimony, and he clearly does not care to tell a linear story. Said story opens with a quaint little vignette about Siri's childhood, during which he almost brains a schoolmate, as you do, then bounces between the events that led to Siri and his homies, making first contact with the potentially batty aliens, and the consequences of that, the tale of his unique but failed romance, and various slices of introspection, shall we say. All of it felt unevenly paced. Blindsight also has an issue with info dumping. Now, I'd say my tolerance for info dumping generally tends to be a bit higher than a lot of readers, given reading preferences, but even I have my limits, and when I pick up a novel, I don't expect a thinly veiled essay. No. Unfortunately, Siri spends way too much time indulging in painfully protracted monologues and sharing his hot takes about philosophy of mind and all cognitive neuroscience. That shit wasn't subtle in the slightest. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I adore ideas-driven SFF, but when I read fiction, literature, I expect theming to be fully woven and integrated into storytelling, not for it to be served up as frustrated non-fiction wrapped up in bits of here's sci-fi horror, candy wrapping, as it were. And I mean, this bish also has a 30-page reference bibliography. In and of itself, there's nothing wrong with that, but also at the same time, what's up with that? Keep in mind, I do not by any means wish to slide into ad hominems here, but I cannot help but ask, what's the goal here? What exactly are you hoping to achieve or prove by doing this with a freaking novel, mate? Besides, there are issues with the hard science and Blindsight regardless, but I'll get back to that. As to the prose, once again, I think I'm generally pretty chill when it comes to prose. I can like it more utilitarian, I can like it more purple, and I can tolerate a certain amount of techno-babble, no big. Oh boy, there was a lot of techno-babble in Blindsight. Just a lot of it, especially when it came to describing astrophysics-related things. And I'm sorry, not sorry, but stringing a bunch of fancy-sounding physics words together does not a good, much less meaningful, description make. You can throw in EM fields, warp drives, quantum entanglements, or whatever out the wazoo if it makes you happy, sure, but it doesn't change the fact that it won't amount to anything more than gobbledygook unless those terms are utilized to convey something actually substantive. I will say this though, since this techno-babble had next to no real substance, I was basically able to blank most of it out and just breeze through Blindsight. Thank fuck for that. On to the character work. Woo, lordy. So you'll know I'm not a character-driven SFF reader, right? I've stated this way too many times already, but that does not mean I'm just going to be chill with a protag, here our friendly bruv, Siri, who is nothing more than an edgily nihilistic and sexist asshat, and who does little more than snarkily spout r/I am 14 and this is deep levels of rationalist philosophy in my face. Bish was a train wreck. So you're told he's uber special because half his brain was chopped out to cure his childhood epilepsy. Yikes. This then apparently made him into a sociopath light, and worse, by association, high-functioning autistic. Double fucked up yite, but I'll get back to the borderline ableism in a second. The issue here, or one of them at any rate, is that he doesn't actually read as truly special. Siri mostly read to me as an edgy and sexist normie who also happens to be a genuine shithead. Yet every so often the plot does its best to remind you, not show you, to be clear, remind you that he is not, in fact, a normie, but special. Because he lacks empathy, because he lacks half of his brain, and this means he's a human Chinese room. Yite. But then, lo and behold, he eventually acquires a measure of empathy and thus consciousness. Stick with me here, I'll come back to this. All in order to ram the novel's theming down your throat. Indeed, the sorry, pathetic excuse this character has for an arc is nothing but a theming delivery device, and ultimately, Siri is little more than an aggravating mouthpiece. Then you have the supporting cast, which suffers from the same problem, if not to a worse degree. It's also where the ableism adjacent bullshit comes in. Yay! Now, you have to understand that Blindsight is primarily sold on its merits as the rock hardest of hardest fuck science fiction. It's certainly a big claim to make for any novel, but if I see this labeling applied to a piece of fiction, guess what? My expectations will, to a certain extent, follow suit. And yes, a huge part of my beef with Blindsight has to do with this specific labeling, but the fact is I encountered this issue with the character work as well. Not only did I spot scientific inaccuracies, if you will, in Blindsight's characterization, these inaccuracies read as ableist adjacent in places. It's bad enough Siri and his homies are little more than theming mouthpieces. They do their mouthpiecing through various kinds of neuropsychiatric abnormalities. The worst offender here, without a doubt, was a female character who voluntarily chose to give herself dissociative identity disorder. Problem is, DID is conflated with schizophrenia, for one thing, yite. Its psychopathology is misrepresented for another, yite. And then an argument is also made that someone with DID has more consciousness by virtue of having multiple personalities. Excuse me, what? If you're going to claim this novel is a work of genius when it comes to theming on philosophy of mind and neuroscience, then I cannot let this egregious bullshit pass. Then there's the autism stuff. Holy fucking shit. There are at least 3, perhaps even 4 instances where high-functioning autism is conflated with sociopathy. To that, I say, fuck you straight up. One instance would be bad enough, though acceptable, I suppose. But this bullshit kept popping up, and I was like, oh my god, dude, just shut up. Shut the fuck up. This conflation is not only made to characterize Siri, but also to... give me strength. Characterize Blindsight's prehistoric vampires. You'd just love to see this kind of abject fucking nonsense. Now yes, I know this novel was published in 2006, and I'm fully aware neuroscience is one of the most rapidly evolving fields of scientific inquiry. That's all fine, but the point is Blindsight is still currently promoted as the hottest of hard sci-fi, with no mention of its dated information or any other major caveats that I could see out in the wild. So I'm going to call the bullshit out, if only in the name of, readers' informed consent. Blindsight's world building was a mixed bag overall, and can be divided in roughly 3 categories: the general stuff, the aliens, and the vampires. Starting with the general stuff, I can't say I really got a strong sense of setting or future societal world-building, anything like that, in Blindsight. You just get a rough sketch, basically, and whilst it wasn't terrible, it wasn't particularly evocative or immersive either. You're told humanity has reached a post-scarcity state, but the way Siri describes society made it all sound rather dystopian to me. A lot of people upload their cells into a sort of matrix called heaven to transcend death and the vicissitudes of fleshy life. Okay, disabilities are largely removed or fixed at birth, but then some people purposefully give themselves mental illnesses or neuropsychiatric disorders, which, yeah, just refer back to my comments on Blindsight's ableism light in the character work section. In-person romantic relationships are very rare because reasons? And a big deal is made out of Siri trying to date a woman in the flesh. Most people have access to a plethora of substances and neural enhancements, think generic cyberpunk-esque type stuff. That being said, a cyborg character on Siri's crew also indulges in smoking literal cigarettes because... reasons. As I see it, it all lacked internal cohesion, and some of these elements clearly felt like they were only there in isolation to prop up the book's theming in a way that felt unbalanced. But now let's talk about them aliens. Major plot development spoilers in 1, 2, 3. So Blindsight's crew makes first contact with a big dumb object called Rorschach, just like the discredited psychometric analysis test. It is, in fact, a giant living organism, more or less. It looks like a giant crown of thorns, make of that what you will, and there's a decent, creepy sci-fi horror factor that goes along with the sections of the novel devoted to exploring the interior of Rorschach, trying to make sense of it, and its organic subunits, shall we say? The Scramblers. Now, if you want to make a scrambler, you take a spindly starfish, a spine, a burr, mush them all together, and ba-bam! They're said to be super smart, but not self-aware, and are more akin to leukocytes within Rorschach than individual organisms like you or I. Right. They can evade human eyesight because of something to do with ocular spin, was it? I'll admit I didn't exactly look this up, but the Scrambler's invisibility didn't really make sense to me as it was explained on paper at any rate, so make of that what you will, as always. At first, they're said to lack a nervous system, but then they're kinda shown to have one. Okay, they get big tortured by series crew because nihilistic, life is all about pain and suffering type theming I'll get to shortly, blah 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 blah. It was alright, I suppose, from a species building point of view. Scramblers were conceptually neat enough, but honestly, taken as a whole, the alien element of Blindsight didn't amount to much more than a giant cosmic wet fart. Finally, we have the fucking prehistoric vampires. Or vampies, for short. The vampies are carnivorous hominids that are supposedly super mega schmort, super mega sociopathic, or per the text, akin to high-functioning autistic people. Oh my fucking god, please kill me now. But they get big epilepsy if they see right angles, crosses, etc. And since Homo sapiens don't, this gave us an evolutionary advantage in the long run. Yippee. So we survived, and the vampies croaked, even though they are genius super predators that feast on human flesh, not blood. But they are still, yes, called vampires, and for some reason, some bruv, at InGen no doubt, thought it was a good idea to resurrect them for subaltern usage. Look, I'm not intrinsically against the idea of science fiction vampires, but holy shit, I cannot stress enough how abysmally stupid I found their execution in Blindsight. Next to nothing about their species building made sense to me from an evolutionary, ecological, or paleoanthropological standpoint. An infuriating theming-driven conflation is additionally made between the concepts of predation, antisociality, and sociopathy. Indeed, the vampies are said to be sociopathic because they are predatory carnivores. Killer whales are even brought up as an analogy to underline this point. But that's not how that works at all. Also, mentioning killer whales was kind of hilarious to me, given their complex social systems and emotional lives, but I'm not saying you can't create cave vampies that are sociopathic by default. If you want, have at it, but A, don't conflate that shit with high-functioning autism, for one thing, please and fucking thank you, and B, don't justify it with some ass-backwards evo-psych nonsense that argues a predatory animal isn't functionally different from a human serial killer. Or do, but do not ask me to take this seriously as hard sci-fi. Fuck off. Blindsight's world, or species building, or what have you, was a very mixed bag, quality-wise, and I believe this is largely because its individual elements are developed only as much as is required to drive the point of the story's theming, if not thesis, deep into the reader's no doubt assumed to be thick skull. This theming, as I see it, has two main unequal but interrelated facets, that of consciousness and that of sociopathy. Let's start with the first and larger of the two. The Scramblers, Rorschach, the serial killer cave vampies, Siri being an edgy human Chinese room. Not really, as it turns out, because of fucking duh, but anywho, even the god's awful character with DID, everything in Blindsight is there to bore its central philosophical conceit into the reader's mind with a sledgehammer, that consciousness is not only an accidental byproduct of evolution, that apparently only humans possess, it is a deleterious one. The novel's very title, as an FYI, is kind of supposed to clue you into this as well, because Blindsight refers to a medical condition wherein a person isn't fully aware of their own otherwise mostly functioning vision from like a mechanical point of view. This does, in fact, cause problems for people who have it, but here I'm assuming you're just supposed to understand it as further proof consciousness is, well, entirely unnecessary at the very least. Now, if you're going to tackle this complex of a theme and make the case for that huge of a claim, I expect to see the nuanced work required to prop it all up and make it passively convincing, especially once again if I'm to consider your story the hardest of hard science fiction. Blindsight, in my opinion, utterly, and I mean utterly fails on this front, for two principal reasons. For starters, consciousness is one of the hardest fucking concepts to precisely define, and there is so much egregious conflation of terms and concepts in the book that I couldn't even tell, past a certain point, what exactly the author was even talking about. Consciousness, sentience, awareness, self-awareness, all of these terms are used interchangeably across different fields of knowledge, which is fine in a colloquial context, but not when you purport to write diamond-hard science fiction with diamond-hard theming, because those terms can actually mean different things. Like, holy shit, this theme of all freaking themes needs specificity and nuance if you want me to engage with it at a high level in good faith. What's worse though, empathy is also kind of conflated with the previous terms. What the actual fuck? Because yeah, there's an uber weird equivalency drawn between sociopathy or ASPD, lack of empathy, what have you, and lack of self-awareness or consciousness, and I was like, the fuck is that about? So consciousness is bad. Never mind the fact you're never really sure what the fuck is actually meant by consciousness in this book exactly, nor the fact evolutionary theory isn't actually about qualifying things as better or worse in a human value sense. Blindsight's philosophical conceit rests entirely on circular reasoning. The only reason the book can confidently state consciousness is bad, herder, is because humans get fucked by a super smart alien without a consciousness. And I guess half conscious, whatever the fuck that means, serial killer vampies, because empathy and consciousness are also conflated, like I said. That super intelligent alien doesn't actually exist because this is a novel. Duh. So it was just incredibly bizarre to me how preachy and adamant Blindsight felt with regards to this idea. That an organism could be big schmort without self-awareness isn't simply presented as a neutral possibility, an avenue natural selection could explore with as much gusto as intelligent sentience. Because why not? No. The book posits instead that because consciousness is worthless evolutionary trash, there surely must be a non-sentient, super smart alien out there who could wipe us off the cosmic map. And then, because it then presents you with a fictional, non-conscious but super smart alien that could easily wipe humanity off the cosmic map, it must surely follow that consciousness is in fact worthless evolutionary trash. Just, what? No, I'm sorry, I can't with this shit. My brain noped out. Then you have the mild boner for sociopathy shtick, kind of. Either way, it all essentially boils down to the vampies being genetically superior to human beings. To wit, Siri, who is also said to be mildly sociopathic, when it's not high-functioning autism, once again, kill me now, and mildly non-conscious because he's a human Chinese room, but not really, he eventually acquires a measure of empathy and awareness after being violently assaulted by the vampy captaining his crew. I don't know what the fuck that was about. I guess in Blindsight land, mutilation generates mirror neurons? Sure, yeah, let's go with that. Anywho, after an epic showdown with Rorschach, everyone but Siri dies, and he finds himself stuck in a space pod. He now has feels and shit, huzzah! And the book concludes with him musing over the fact his cave vampy captain was, well, right all along. Consciousness and empathy, because again, why be specific with your concepts when, you know, you can just conflate shit to your heart's content, are weak trademark. And might makes right because very bad understanding of evolution. Yay! I'm not going to hide the fact, and I couldn't even if I wanted to, right? I don't agree in the slightest with Blindsight's philosophical conceit or the messages I felt its themes were driving at. That being said, I can still appreciate, or at the very least not hate, a novel that presents diverging opinions to mine, shall we say? So that's not really what bothered me here. No, My biggest issue with the execution of Blindsight's theming is that it and its intertwined message of edgy nihilism was presented as, well, borderline fact and not subjective opinion. But here's the thing, let's assume for a hot minute we're all hardcore materialist atheists here. I'm not, for the sake of argument, that we all agree life, the universe, and everything, that's what I did, are inherently meaningless. The consciousness, self-awareness, the self, what have you, is a simple accident of natural selection. So the fuck what? In a way, you can still create meaning for yourself in this world, in this lifetime, if you want to, and with others. And the fact is that even if the self is an absurd and pointless waste product of the brain, it still exists despite everything. And isn't that in and of itself kind of wonderful? Isn't there beauty in this accident? Isn't that good enough in a way, at least some of the time? And I mean, hell, I say this as someone intimately familiar with suicidal depression. Just saying. This is the core of what fundamentally bugged me about Blindsight. I've seen it presented as a work of, forgive me for doing this, the hardest of hard science fiction, featuring genius levels of thematic brilliance, blah blah blah, and this seems to be intrinsically tied with its very nihilism. But the fact the book pushes a message of edgy, misanthropic, quasi-pro-sociopathy nihilism does not actually make it brilliantly intelligent or rational by default. Because this is not a question of science, hard or otherwise, or of reason trademark. It is a question of subjective opinion. As I just showed, the book's central philosophical conceit, or at least its first clause, does not have to lead to its thematic conclusion. It is a belief, worldview, ideology, what have you, driven narrative choice. And I guess I'm just really sick and tired of seeing this kind of stuff presented as something it is not. A mark of genius trademark, IQ busting intelligence, superior reason trademark, hashtag facts and logic, etc. You can, in fact, be a genius and an optimistic humanist. Conversely, you can be an abject moron and a bitter asshole. You can, in effect, be intellectually gifted and a teenage edgelord. Yes, I'm thinking of specific people with that comment. But my point is that you are not a genius because you're a teenage edgelord. And to be clear, once again, no, I do not mean to personally attack the author here. I wish him the best of luck in his future endeavors. What I'm not even attacking here, but critiquing, is the troubling takes and attitudes I see way too often surrounding works like Blindsight and their, sorry not sorry, majority male authors or creators. There is a pattern with this shit, sue me. Additionally, and in response to all of the above, I have decided to say fuck off to the hard v soft science fiction dichotomy. Bye-bye. I'm just done with it, because labeling stuff as hard science fiction tends, yes, to come with a bunch of off-putting nonsense I no longer wish to participate in. So from now on, I will be using a primarily ideas-driven v primarily entertainment-driven, and anything in between, labeling paradigm. As to Blindsight specifically, I just hated it. I hated it. I hated its main character, Siri can fuck off. I hated its theming, fuck off as well. Its pacing was jank, sure. Its prose was too techno-babbly. Its world-building felt underwhelming, especially its aliens. Its narrative, nihilistically pointless, which actually kind of makes sense, I suppose. Honestly, I would have been much happier reading a short story or novella at most about series crew simply exploring Rorschach zooming in on the sci-fi horror. Like I said in my introduction, this is the worst novel I have read this year. So far, yes, it was worse than The Book of the New Sun, and hopefully I won't read anything worse before the close of 2023. I would obviously not recommend this one unless you adore grimdark, nihilistic science fiction that is, yes, technically ideas driven. I will give it that, though that statement comes with massive caveats. I just cannot with the over-the-top edgy nihilism. Speaking of which, may I just quickly add that, fuck it, I do find it kinda gross. Yeah, to use a quote by Ted freaking Bundy for your prologue's epigraph. I think I'm pretty open-minded when it comes to creative license, but an actual serial rapist and killer who has contributed exactly nothing of value to humanity? Really? Yeah, I think that's where I draw the line. Especially given the novel is prefaced by 2, or was it 3, other uber-nihilistic quotes. Hashtag I am a teenage edgelord. We get it, bruv. Life is pain, the universe is violence, sociopathy for the win. But you know what? Blindsight gets a 3.5 out of 10 in my book, so it can get the fuck out of my face. Please and thank you. And that will be all for this, yes, very salty Rant review. I mean, I suppose it was a tad overdramatic at times, but it's all in good fun, though. As a reminder, I do very much stand by every single opinion I shared in the Rant review. Either way, I hope you found it interesting, informative, engaging, dare I say entertaining. And if you want to share your thoughts and feelings about Blindsight in the comments down below, you're more than welcome to do so. But on that very final note, I hope you all have a lovely day, evening, or whichever time of day you prefer. Do take good care of yourselves. Thank you for the continued support, and I shall see you all reasonably soon this time, I swear, in another video. But until then, bye-bye.